Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. We're really excited to have you here with us today for our exciting, engaging event with Women in Wealth. Again, where we've been and where we're going. So we really hope you leave here today inspired and empowered relative to what you hear in terms of our conversations with our terrific panel. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mary Johnson, our moderator, and she will lead us in introducing our panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Johnson. I'm the editor for bizwomen.com. We are a national news website for women in business. I'm going to go down the line here and ask all the panelists to introduce themselves so you can get a very small sense of how truly amazing they are. Andrea, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. I'm Andrea Turner Moffitt, and I actually just recently published a book on women investors and the wealth management industry called Harness the Power of the Purse, Winning Women Investors, which was actually the culmination of almost 3 years of research that had many of the similar findings from the recent white paper that Regions did on women as investors. But we also looked globally at some of the unique dynamics of women as investors across the US, the UK, and 4 countries in Asia. And I also am the co-founder of a private investment platform called Plum Alley Investments that is focused on engaging women and men to invest in women entrepreneurs. And one small aside, I just have to mention this is particularly special for me because I'm actually also a Regions shareholder. Very small, but I grew up in the Midwest, even though I live now in New York. And my grandfather, who was a farmer, was on the board of one of the small local banks in Bloomington, Illinois, and that was back in the 60s. But the shares have passed not just through generation, but through acquisitions from union planters to Regions. Mm-hmm. So it's very special to be here to share a little bit of my work around women investors.
Great. My name is Mary Meeder. I am president of Harmelin Media. Harmelin is a strategic media and planning buying company. We do all the media for Regions Bank, and we're thrilled with that partnership. I am also a Penn State grad, so I am very jealous of everything that Alabama has accomplished recently. So congratulations, you're on your way, and I hope we're there soon someday too.
Hi there, I'm Liz O'Donnell, and I'm the author of a book called Mogul, Mom, and Maid, The Balancing Act of the Modern Woman, and I'm currently working on book number 2, which is how we care for our aging parents and maintain our career, marriage, and sanity. Not sure if you can yet, I'll let you know. And by day, when I'm not writing, I run the East Coast operations of a PR and marketing firm called Double Forte in Boston and New York.
Right. Hi, I'm Pam Iorio, and thank you, Regions, for inviting. This is great to be here in Birmingham. I'm the CEO and president of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. And, but I got my start in politics as a young woman. At age 25, I ran for the Hillsborough County Commission. So then I had a 26-year career in politics as a county commissioner, as the supervisor of elections, and then 2-term mayor of Tampa. When I left office, I wrote on leadership and talked on leadership and then just got a phone call out of the blue one day asking if I would run Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. So sometimes you just have to say yes, and I really enjoy it, and really pleased to be here.
Terrific. We have a great panel of women. I'm Ann Copeland. As Mike shared, I lead private wealth management here at Regions. 33 years of experience in financial services, so a lot of experience working with women and men relative to their investing and their overall financial needs overall. We launched our Women in Wealth initiative probably about a year ago, and again, we just recently completed and released the findings of our Women in Wealth study, which has been very, very helpful and informative. And we really are focused on helping women equip them, empower them, educate them relative to financial matters so they are better equipped to reach their goals overall.
Well, great. So I'm really thrilled to be here. I should say, as Mary brought up football, I went to the University of Florida, so it's difficult when I'm managing to be here with a smile on my face. But I'm really thrilled to be here. In my job, doing what I do, I get to talk to amazing women every day. So this is, just sort of a live version of that. So that's wonderful. But I was particularly so intrigued by this study because it really puts numbers to a phenomenon that we're all very familiar with, which is the fact that women are very smart and talented and driven, and we apparently have no idea that that's the case. It's this confidence gap that we learn so much about. Now, that being said, there have been significant strides lately. There are estimates that by the year 2030, women will control 2/3 of the nation's wealth, that today women are earning more college degrees than men, and that women account for nearly 12 trillion of the 18 trillion in global spending. So I want to ask each of you, what are you seeing in your respective industries for what these shifts are meaning, to the businesses that you're in, but also to the women that you're working with? I'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay, great. Well, I think, for me, obviously, I've been immersed in this kind of whole topic for the last few years, and actually left Wall Street. I spent about a decade in investment banking on Wall Street, and left because I saw this incredible phenomenon of more women working, more women accumulating wealth, and I wanted to understand how do we really harness that and better engage women as investors. And actually, as part of the research that culminated in the book, we quantified that women have decision-making power over about 11.2 trillion of investable assets here in the US. So that's decision-making, either primary or joint decision-making, again, over investable assets, not the total wealth number, which is obviously much larger. But one of the things I wanted to understand as we look at those numbers was, how is the composition of that wealth shifting? And we found actually that over 50% of women who we surveyed that were part of this research said that they were the primary source of their household assets. So this is women rising to the tops of global organizations, business owners, professionals as doctors, lawyers, et cetera. And I think dramatically shifting historically the way the industry has thought about women as a market. So, importantly, and we look at in the book and in the research, the ways in which women engage, confidence, risk, decision-making factors across all segments, but very importantly, understanding that the market's not monolithic. There are big important differences and very important markets between spouses, between inheritors, as well as professional women. So I think certainly seeing that be a big shift, and what I've seen in the industry is a big recognition, really, even just over the last 18 to 24 months, around. We've kind of been talking about women in wealth for almost 10 years. If you look back, I was at Citibank. Citi had Citi Women & Co. starting in 2000. But I think there's a much bigger focus on what do we really need to do differently beyond marketing. Because, and as I said this in the book, it's not about a marketing campaign. It's truly about a culture shift and really how we shift the dialogue, how we engage. And again, I think it's more about culture, and I think a lot of firms are taking that seriously, because it's not that women want different products. We certainly don't want it to be pink and shrinked, but it's about a more holistic conversation and kind of the experience of being more inclusive.
And what do you think, Mary?
Well, being in the advertising agency, I'm sure that many of you have seen Mad Men. It's the series on AMC. And I think it did a really good job of depicting the advertising world back in the 60s and early 70s, where men controlled the agency, men were the clients, and men really controlled all the media outlets. And women were really in the secretarial pool, or they were manning the switchboard. But then things started to change in the 80s and 90s, and women really rose to power, and they were creating agencies and media buying services like the owner of my company. They were the general managers and the general sales manager of the TV stations and editor of the newspaper. And a lot, we feel, had to do with that advertising has that creativity to it, and it also is a lot of consumer behavior where there's sociology and psychology involved. So women did very well in the 80s and 90s. But then the internet hit. And with that, men got re-engaged. It was a lot of the data scientists and the analytics as well as the digital. And they kind of own that aspect of our business for a while now. But what I see happening now is a lot of younger women are going into school, trying to get the STEM degrees and coming out with those degrees, or even with the curiosity to understand the data and analytics that is now consuming advertising. So I see it on an upswing now, that it's been quite a roller coaster ride over the past 50 years, but I see that these women are definitely engaging in the right fields to be able to really do well in the future in the advertising world.
And what I see from a marketing perspective, too, is the rise of femvertising, right? The Run Like a Girl campaign, Hello Flo, Goldie Blocks. You're really seeing these go girl ads. And what I think is also happening is that brands and marketing firms are realizing that women control most of the purchasing decision, but we've had a team of all men marketing to them. So you're starting to see diversity. We still only have, 3% of creative directors are women, so there's a long way to go, but people are starting to say, if I'm going to market to a diverse audience, I need to have a diverse team.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of changes, and one in politics where a lot of women are in politics today and very successful, but still not very many women in the executive ranks. So when you look at the governor, mayors across the country, very rare to see a woman. So now I've transitioned into the nonprofit world, and we have about 313 affiliates across the country, Big Brothers Big Sisters affiliates, and the majority of them are headed by women. There are a lot of women involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters because women, I think, care a lot about mentoring. Most have had important mentors in their own lives to get where they are. But where I still see this very big gap is in the corporate boardroom. And so as I interface with a lot of corporations in terms of support for what I'm involved with, I don't see many women there. So both in politics at the executive level and corporate at the executive level is where I think women still have not made the kind of progress that they need to make, which ultimately benefits their wealth.
So I think that's a great observation. And if you think about financial services, so while women have made great strides, to some of Mary's comments earlier and to Andrea's comments as well, and they'll continue to make great strides, their confidence is not moving at a similar pace to the strides that we are making overall. And as a result of that, they tell us that they have less confidence in making their own financial decisions overall. And what they also tell us is they're generally more comfortable working with advisors versus doing their own research on their own, but they want to work with advisors who want to really know them, want to understand what they want to accomplish, what are their goals overall, and then people who are strong relationship builders who build trust. So I really think in the financial services industry, we have not only an opportunity, but also a responsibility, frankly, to work with women in that way so that we can really help increase their confidence over time, so that then that confidence measure really does start to match and start to track with the accomplishments that we'll make over the next 20 to 30 years, and women will be best prepared for retirement and other life events overall.
That's a great point that you bring up, and it brings us right into my next question, which is really about that confidence gap, particularly as it relates to the investing. And the study that you all did found that that confidence gap, or the low confidence rate that women were reporting, was particularly pronounced in investing, retirement savings, and long-term financial planning. So sometimes I think that confidence, that lack of confidence or perceived lack of confidence, could be seen as caution, risk aversion, which can be a very good thing. And you hear about companies really embracing sort of that female tendency toward risk aversion because it can prevent some really negative things from happening. So I'm wondering, is caution or risk aversion a good thing, or is it really about developing that confidence in conjunction with that?
Starting with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I very much looked at that as well and had some similar findings to the region's work. And I think they're totally interconnected. Engagement, confidence, comfort with risk, I'll call it. And we found, in fact, in our research, and this was, again, global, but in the US, we found absolutely a gender gap when it comes to confidence. In fact, we found 35% of men said that they were confident with their level of financial acumen as compared to 19% of women. But what was fascinating is that we also included a basic financial literacy assessment. And women were actually more knowledgeable than they gave themselves credit. So 34% of women passed this financial literacy assessment, and 34% of men passed the financial literacy assessment. So men, were right on par with what they thought. Usually, we typically do see in research that men are more confident than they're overconfident. But what was also fascinating, so women, almost half as confident as they're not giving themselves enough credit for their level of financial acumen. What was most striking to me was the global differences. So this research, as I mentioned, we looked at women and men in the UK, 4 countries in Asia. And we found, actually just wrote a piece in the Harvard Business Review on this, but we found that women in Asia, well, women in the US were the least confident financially compared to women in the UK or any of the countries in Asia, which were India, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore, by a factor of almost 2 times.
Really?
Yeah, and I always get this question when I speak, wow, what's at the heart of that? And I think it's a very multifaceted issue, but I do think you can't underestimate cultural phenomenon. And you brought up Mad Men, and I actually write about it in the book. I think that the US is still suffering from the overhang of the 50s and the Mad Men culture, whereas interestingly in China, for example, women used to control the silk and gold trade in Shanghai for centuries. And so they've been very comfortable seeing themselves as money decision makers. And just as importantly, men have been very comfortable in seeing women as money decision makers. And in fact, in the industry, women represent about 50% of advisors, whereas here in the US, it jostles somewhere around 20%. So I think that those cultural factors have a major impact. And we see actually, and we looked at the interconnection then with level of engagement, where in the US we had about 44% of women said that they were a primary joint decision maker, as compared to over 80% of women in many of the countries in Asia. And we also saw that women in Asia were much more comfortable with risk than women in the US. So women in the US being a little bit more risk averse. Although I will say, I think I think it's a fallacy to go in and assuming that women were more risk averse than men. And we actually heard that quite a bit in our focus groups and in our interviews. And we actually show, and it's in the book, that when you break down the subsegments of the market, it doesn't hold true, the gender gap on risk. In fact, for example, inheritors, there was no statistically significant difference in our numbers between women who were inheritors and their level of comfort with risk as compared to men. So I think that there are a lot of assumptions that lead to erosion of trust, because you might come in assuming women are not as engaged or more risk averse, and that may not actually be the case. So it's quite a complex issue.
That's interesting. Well, and what do you think, and what you see?
I
with
think
your
Andrea
clients?
had some great points with that, because I think the answer to that is it depends. And what I mean by that is I think each woman is different, and each woman or man is different. And so really getting to know them, understanding them well enough, understanding what they want to accomplish, and then what is their risk tolerance. And many times when we work with clients, what we find is if they may have a conservative risk tolerance, but then when you look at their goals, they won't achieve their goals unless there is a tweak made, either to their risk tolerance or to their goals overall. And so sometimes we'll ask them to either take a little bit more risk or maybe dial back their goals. But then there may be some women we work with or men who are much more aggressive on their risk tolerance. In that case, you find that they may overshoot their goals. And so they have an ability to either dial back that risk tolerance or dial back their goals. So I think it really gets to the individual woman, frankly, and what her perspective is or is not in having those conversations.
That's really interesting. Did anyone else want to expand on that at all? Or?
Well, I just offer that, men have this great ability to assume that they can do anything even if they can't, with no offense to any of the wonderful men who are here. And women have the opposite problem often, thinking that if I haven't done it before, I can't do it. And I have to constantly, so many times in my career I've offered jobs. One time I called someone to offer them a position as a department head in the city, and I started by saying, I've been looking for someone with, and I started to name some attributes, and she said, I have the perfect person for you. And I said, I'm calling to offer you the job. And even when I visited with a female to become my CFO of the city, and she said, well, I come from the private sector, I don't think I can do it. I said, of course you can do it. I had to circle back around with her twice to get her to agree to do it, whereas I think most men would have said, sure, I've never done it before, but I'll just do it. I see it all the time, and I really like to encourage women to do things that they've never done before, because, people have never been moms before, but they're great moms, right? You're not a mom until you're a mom. And so we're so willing to be a mom and do a great job with it. But then when it comes to so many other things in life, sometimes it's like, I haven't done that before. And you can do it if you just say yes and get into it and do it. And sometimes I think there's a confidence gap there with gender.
I think you're absolutely right. I had it when I was offered this job, quite frankly. One of the other things that you went into, that Regents went into with the study, was talking about the issue of financial education. And You saw less time spent on financial education among the women who were surveyed, but you also at the same time saw that there were more women than men who said that they, if they were talking to their younger selves, they would advise them to seek out more financial advice from financial professionals. So there's definitely a need and desire for that financial education. So how can we fill that void? What can banks do? What are other opportunities? Andrea, I feel like I'm leaning on you heavily right now, but I want to ask you to start off with, and then see who else has any thoughts to add on the panel. But how can we expand this for women who are hungry for it, but maybe not going after it?
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge opportunity for the industry to really think about how they can partner with women as investors to be part of helping close the confidence gap. I would say I think it's important for the industry and firms individually to really think about their client base, because I think kind of the broad-based educational event, at least I heard this from women as part of focus groups and interviews, there's a different conversation depending on, as an individual where you are in your life, and whether you're a professional and you might be grappling or thinking about certain issues around retirement or taking a sabbatical or on-ramping and off-ramping versus, if you're an inheritor or perhaps a spouse. So I think there needs to be a more thoughtful, targeted, segmented approach around education. I also think that you can't underestimate that time is actually the scarcest resource for almost all women. And so, the time piece of it there has to be a lot of value. But I also found that, same numbers, women very thirsty for more knowledge. But the reality is there is a lot of financial literacy information out there on the websites, and in all kinds of information available. And I know myself, it's the last thing on the Sunday night to-do list, and it keeps being the last thing for years. Because of, it feels complicated, it's time consuming. And so I think if you can pair it with other experiences, in particular, one of the things that I wanted to get at quite a bit was this desire, for women, when you think about the priorities around finance, investing, financial decisions, that performance and product are kind of a baseline, it's expected. And for women, there was this deeper, richer desire to see how that was aligned with meaning, purpose, impact in their lives. And we see it in women's careers all the time. In fact, the Center for Talent Innovation does a lot of research on that front in terms of women and excelling in professional careers. But I do think the more you can align and think about, wow, how do the financial decisions really afford what it is you're trying to create in life and the agency impact you want to have, is particular interest. The other thing that I've found and has kind of led to some of my work over the last year is a huge interest among women to really engage around thinking about the impact they can have with their investments, particularly around women entrepreneurs. And a desire to say, wow, I'm interested in really thinking about how I can invest in women entrepreneurs and help them be successful in the impact and the innovation that they're having in the companies that they're building. And so we do at Plum Alley Investments a whole effort around, it's kind of our own version of Shark Tank that's a lot more inclusive than a grilling experience. But it is an education around thinking about, wow, what makes this company a good investment opportunity? So it's not kind of 101 stocks and bonds, but it's learning through experience that I think is an exciting, innovative approach.
That's interesting. Anne, I could bounce back to you or anybody else who has any thoughts on the financial education piece.
Yeah. I think it has to be a multi-pronged strategy, I think somewhat to your point, because you can look at education, it's a very, very broad topic. And so how can you get really tailored to those women who want to source their own resource, their own information? As you said, a lot of people are really, really busy. They don't have the time to do that. What we saw in our Regions Women in Wealth study is that more women are apt to look to an advisor versus doing their research on their own. So again, making sure you have advisors who are very equipped with the appropriate skill sets, the appropriate behaviors, and the appropriate information to really resonate with women overall, I think is huge. So really thinking about it in several different ways depending on the women you are working with overall.
And I think women are really, all consumers are expecting to be communicated to like one-on-one. That message has to resonate right to them. It can't be their broad message. It has to be directed to what they need and who they are. Well,
and it kind of gets to another question, talking about all these women looking for this advice, looking to professionals specifically or largely, does this present a unique opportunity to grow? And Andrea, you touched on this earlier, to grow the number of women in the financial planning and investment sectors. Do women want female financial advisors more than male financial advisors? And Mary, you kind of talked about this in that you want people who are really understanding what you're looking for, and do we speak the same language and therefore advise each other better? Anybody? Anne, we can go back to you.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in and then y'all please follow me. So a couple of different things. So in working with many female prospects and clients over the years, what I've learned, what I've heard from them so many times is I want to have a conversation with someone who really wants to get to know me, someone who is a really good listener, who asks what my goals are, what my concerns are, really takes the time to build that relationship with me, and through that, I will grow to trust that individual. And once I trust that individual, that advisor, I will be extremely loyal to that advisor as well, okay? Too many times women have told me, boy, I was working with an advisor, but the advisor was condescending. Or even worse, they said, don't worry, we'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about these things overall. And again, very bright, very intelligent women, and did not resonate whatsoever. So at Regions today, 45% of our wealth advisors are female. 53% of our trust advisors are female, which I think is terrific, but I don't think it has to be about a female advisor is going to resonate with a female prospect or client. I think it's more about someone who exhibits those traits and behaviors I mentioned earlier in working with their clients. And I've had women tell me that time after time. Again, my advisor, and it didn't matter if that person was male or female, but how they worked with them, how they asked lots of questions, how they listened, how they were a partner, to your point earlier, how I trust them. I can call them at any time of the day or night, but they give me great advice. They take the time to really get to know me overall, which is huge. So I don't think it's so much about female advisors working with females. It's really advisors with those types of traits, those behaviors, working well with women and really resonating in that way.
First of all, I have to say that is fantastic of your numbers that you mentioned. That's so impressive compared to what I know our general numbers of diversity across the industry. But we actually tested the question because we wanted to know, do women prefer female advisors? And the answer was no. In fact, that it really is about trust. And we wanted to unpack trust a little bit because I think that can sound so obvious but be so difficult to earn. So we quantified a set of 6 what we call inclusive advisor behaviors that earn trust, loyalty, and satisfaction with women and men as investors. And what was interesting, and those are behaviors like understands me, educates me, creates a safe space, helps align life, financial resources. But what was most interesting is that we found that advisors with what we call gender smarts, so that can be female advisors or male advisors who have this deeper, richer appreciation of the value of difference and the different perspectives that women might bring as clients, were much more likely to exhibit those behaviors. So, an advisor with gender smarts, over 50% more likely to create a safe space and earn that trust, satisfaction, loyalty of the female client. So I think, the piece around gender smarts, and I talk a lot about it in the book. In fact, I did the book because I was speaking quite a bit after I'd published the research originally, and I had so many men come up to me in events like this and say, wow, this is really great. How does one come by gender smarts? And it was actually something that I hadn't thought of, and we didn't touch on it in the research originally. But it struck me, and it's something that's been talked about more broadly at the work of the Center for Talent Innovation when you think about acquired diversity. So gender smarts being one attribute of acquired diversity, but so too is LGBT awareness or cultural fluency or generational savvy. And so one who's not inherently diverse can have acquired diversity. And I actually have seen that over the last 2 years, that's been quite powerful because really, it is important that we partner across the board with men in driving change around this. And I think, the more we think about our personal and professional experiences and the inflection points in our life that have given this the acquired diversity, in this case, gender smarts. And what I found was so fascinating is that as I interviewed male executives around the world and advisors, they, had light bulb moments as we were talking of, oh, this personal experience gave me the gender smarts that's really influenced my approach in working with clients, or just as importantly, my approach as a leader in how I build a more diverse and inclusive team, because those behaviors in the market with women as clients are very similar to the behaviors needed internally in our firms to be more inclusive as we try to better retain and accelerate more diverse talent, women and multicultural talent in the industry.
That's really interesting. And so talking a little bit more about building these cultures that are going to retain more female executives, that's going to lead to more more wealth for women, and even we talked earlier about inheritance. That's another source of wealth too. So what is this increased wealth going to mean for women? I sort of call it the power and the promise of increased wealth, because there can be power that comes with it. There's certainly promise that comes with it. What do you all see this rising trend in wealth meaning for your industry? And what do you think wealth means for women in 2015? And can the confidence gap affect that? So Mary, I'd like to start with you if you have some thoughts on that.
There's not a competence gap, because women can do everything that a guy can do, but there is a confidence gap, and that still shocks me because, as little girls, we go into kindergarten and we got that. Like, we have that covered. We excel in the classroom, all the extracurriculars, we're good at taking tests, and that goes all the way to the day that we graduate from college, but then we enter the workforce, and the rules are a little different, and business especially rewards big risk-taking, or building teams, or trying something new. And I was at a seminar 2 weeks ago, and Gloria Steinem was the keynote speaker, and she said something that really resonated with me, and that is that you have to see it to be it. And I think the more that these young women see other women making decisions and taking risks and building these teams, that they'll follow suit. And you mentioned, we talked a little bit about buying power, and I think sometimes that gets misconstrued as women are really good shoppers, and we are. But advertisers have really recognized that women are the key decision makers. In a lot of big areas like healthcare, they're making the decision for themselves and their children, as well as their parents and other members of their family. They're a huge part of the automotive decision. And in terms of new product entry and new product development, they rule that area as well. So, our wealth is tied to our buying power, and I think we're starting to get recognized for that. But I think more importantly, it's our decision-making power that will really accumulate that wealth and power going forward. And I see it happening each and every day.
One of the really interesting things in the region study too was there was a relative reluctance on the part of women to acknowledge or talk about the fact or sort of declare themselves as the lead financial decision maker in the household. They were much more likely to say, I share this equally with my spouse or partner, whereas men had more willingness to sort of own that responsibility. I thought that was very interesting too. I'm not sure if would anyone else like to share some thoughts on this wealth for women and what that means or could mean?
I think the definition of wealth is sort of like the definition of having it all. Like, we're all gonna have a different version of it, right? I might be about financial security, and you might be about being able to be philanthropic. So it's going to vary for all of us. But you mentioned power, and I think we all have to own that it's okay to want influence and power, because that's one of the things that wealth can bring. And there's the other Gloria Felt, who's written a few books and a leader in the women's movement. She talks about power to versus power over. And I think that's what wealth can bring women, the power to make charitable donations, the power to support our families. We're not looking to, take over the world, maybe, but not, probably not, right? We're looking to have that influence and power so we can do good things.
I just to add to that, because we talk a lot about power on behalf of.
Yeah.
And, my driving force in this entire work was really around seeing what I think is such an exciting opportunity to really engage women to create the change they want to see in the world. And I think that, you're absolutely right. Wealth can mean something different. But I do, and maybe perhaps wearing my kind of classic banker capitalist hat, do feel that there's such an exciting opportunity for women to engage with their investment power and really thinking about investing in the companies and the causes that they really want to see happen in the world. And then if you look at, capital flows, the more women can have a say in how capital is flowing in the world. And I do think that, particularly when we look at what women entrepreneurs are doing and the innovation that's happening among women entrepreneurs, whether it's new products that they're creating, new services, solving the problems they want as a market, and also at the same time, creating the culture that that we've been, really grappling with to evolve in corporate America. I think there's huge opportunity for women, and I think, what I would like to see, and I won't say it's what we're seeing, but what I think is what I'd like to see over the next 5 to 10 years is really, with this, newfound power for women, their market power, really leveraging that to be investing in the companies and causes they care about advancing in the world. And I think that has to happen certainly for their own retirement and financial security, financial independence. But I also see, investing in women. We actually looked at 8 different areas in which women want to invest or give to causes they care about, things like social services, poverty, education. And what was so fascinating is that we found when women gave or invested about as much as they said they want to in poverty, education, even healthcare and the environment. But when it came to women were 4 times underinvested in women compared to what they wanted to be doing to advance gender equality or advance women in the world. So I think that's a really exciting area that is opportunities for the industry to really partner with what's happening in the nonprofit and the for-profit sector.
Absolutely. So, talking about where, where women really could be having more impact, and we talked earlier about, Mary, you were mentioning specifically with, the internet boom and where that sort of led to kind of a falling off maybe before we revved back up. But there's been a lot of talk lately about women in tech and women in STEM and the lack thereof, and a real concerted push to get more women to pursue those sort of stereotypically male-dominated fields. And so given the fact that more women than men are earning college degrees, why do you think, and Pam, I'm probably going to start with you on this one, what do you think is what do you think the problem is there? What do you think is holding women back from these? And what do you think needs to change to get more women involved in these areas that are really having profound impact?
Yeah, that is where the future is. But women, as we grow up, we're taught to be collaborative. We are collaborative by nature. We get along. We're mostly get-alongers. We like to do things in groups. We like to talk things out. Those are not always the attributes for becoming an IT person. Most IT people...
Should be, though. It would really help.
It would. But don't you wish that those were the attributes of your IT person? And so a lot of that STEM stuff, I didn't gravitate towards it because I was too talkative and, social. And so, algebra and things like that, I never understood it and couldn't understand why it was relevant. And so I think a lot of it is the upbringing and still in our culture where women, it's not a matter of smarts. The smarts are equal, we all know that. It's a matter of socialization and whether or not a young girl wants to spend her time learning about computers and technology because she wants to become an engineer when she's in 8th grade. And the social pressure is to do something else. And I saw that in the raising of my own 2 children. I have a girl and a boy. Very different approaches, and the social pressures almost outweigh anything else. And I think that our school system, as much as now they talk a lot about STEM, it still is not something that I think is stressed enough in terms of making sure that there's a very robust education in that area that all children leave with. But I do think it's just the general nature of young girls not to gravitate towards those fields. I hate to generalize that way, but I can't help but since you've asked me to generalize.
I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she just got straight A's in her first semester in middle school, but she keeps telling me that she's not good at math.
Right.
She's got an A in history, an A in English, and an A in math. But Mom, I'm not good at math. But you are, it's right here. So I went to her math teacher and said, I really need you to tell her that she's doing a great job. Please do that for me.
Yes.
And I don't know where that stems from, but it starts really early. I think part of it is you can't be what you can't see, right?
Right.
I don't think she's reading about Gamergate, but God forbid if she was. I mean, there's a hostile environment for many women still in technology, sadly. But they need to see images of women
Right.
in tech and finance.
And fortunately, there are some incredible images that are out there right now. I just popped into my head because you were talking about the Gamergate thing, and this is not directly related to that, but that woman Isis Anchali who did the hashtag I look like an engineer. I don't know if anybody else was following that story. We were kind of obsessed with it for a while. But she was, sort of criticized because she didn't look like an engineer. She's young and attractive, and a photo of her started circulating online, and she just got these terrible, hateful messages. And she took a stand, and she started this internet campaign for people to take photos of themselves and post it to Twitter. I am an engineer. This is what an engineer looks like. And so seeing people who, and on that note, not only just being a powerful woman in engineering, but also taking a stand for yourself, that's incredible. And so another side question to this was, what do you all do, or what do you see being done in your industries that's really supporting and bringing women up? I don't know if Mary, you want to start there?
We are so driven by data and technology that we put a training program in place. It's for men and women, but it's 9 months. We nurture them through. We want to see if they have a skill set for it, if they have an interest in it. So we put them through the 9 months, and they come out, and the women are like, you know what, I didn't know that I liked this analysis or this data, because the numbers in advertising tell a story. It's not just about the numbers. So the story emerges, and it's really nice to uncover that story. So, it's training, and I'll often pull aside, if I'm promoting a woman into a position and she's with a lot of guys, I'll say, they think they got it, like, I got it. Guys say it like, I got this. I will tell, like, they'll say that, but they have it as much as you have it, but you may hold yourselves back where they're ready to, move full steam ahead. So it's just, I just shove them. I just give them a push and say, you got this. And don't think they have it more than you have it. And it tends to work with these millennials. They're ready to try anything.
Yeah,
That's great. One of the things that not just in finance, but across all industries, the Center for Television has done a lot of research on the topic of sponsorship and how sponsorship is importantly different than mentoring. And I do think that it can't be underestimated, the value of a sponsorship, and that being really how power has been transferred for centuries. And it's the reality of women. We found in the research that women are half as sponsored as men, and multicultural talent are 63% less likely to be sponsored than men. And so, it's natural because it's a mini-me syndrome. I like blondes from the Midwest. Naturally, I'm going to want to help a mentor and potentially even, go more in terms of advocate. But I do think that more and more companies, in fact, the center has 85 global organizations that are part of a task force. And over 20 of them have now seeded sponsorship initiatives, different than mentoring, which is matching. Sponsorship really being preserved for top talent really involves political risk being put on the table because you're putting your brand out there to not just advocate, but really bring somebody up in the ranks, give them visibility with executives or with clients. And I think sponsorship is critically important. That can be happening in companies. It can also be happening with clients. If you are a financial advisor, there is opportunities for you to really be leveraging some political capital to help a client gain visibility with other centers of influence or help them get on that board that they want to get on. And so I think particularly for women to be mindful of not being over-mentored and under-sponsored, and for women in leadership to not over-mentor and under-sponsor. And I think it's very important for men to be thinking about, do they really have a diverse posse of proteges that they are that they're really helping. And then secondly, one of the things that we're doing at Palm Alley Investments is really building a narrative around what you can see as women investors. I mean, I think this point of you can't be what you can't see is hugely important. And we feel it's powerful to build a narrative of women who are investing and sharing a little bit of their story. So we feature women investors on our site, but also giving and showcasing visibility for women entrepreneurs who have amazing businesses and giving visibility to what those companies are doing, in addition to ultimately obviously helping them gain financing and engaging women to be investing in those companies. So kind of two different approaches, so for some food for thought.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, on the entrepreneurship note, that's one thing that we're obviously seeing so much of right now. But it happens a lot with women as they go through their career. Maybe they start corporate and they decide to, off ramp and go into something that's more entrepreneurial, possibly more flexible. And it presents an interesting sort of catch-22, I guess is the phrase, because entrepreneurship certainly is very empowering, and it allows you to really assert control over your own life and your own financial health and well-being. And but there's also a lot of power in the corporate space and with the C-suite positions and board positions. And so when women go out of that, when they get off the ladder, so to speak, they get out of the running for those roles. So Liz, I want to go to you first on this. How do we maximize the entrepreneurship trend without sacrificing the power that's in those corporate positions?
Yeah, I actually don't think it's as bad as we make it out to be. I'm not advocating for the Fortune 100 to be all male CEOs by any means, but I think more people work for small companies, and when you amass the wealth of all the small business owners, there's a lot of power and influence there. In the work that I do in writing the book, in talking to women, I also run a group in Boston called She Starts, and we support women founders. What I hear from so many women is they start their own businesses for two reasons. One is flexibility. In fact, the company that I work for, the woman started it when she had a son who was born with special needs, and her mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was in California, her mother was in Wisconsin, and she said, I can't manage 400 people globally and be in Wisconsin a week a month, and that's what I need to do. At the same time, I'm not just saving for my own retirement anymore, I'm saving for my sons as well. So she started her own business to have the flexibility to care for her family. The other thing I see is the passion piece. I don't want to overgeneralize, but I see a lot of women saying, I need to do something that really resonates. And I don't want to be the big downer in the room right now, but in the past year, I've been present at 2 deaths. I shepherded my mother and my aunt. And you can't go through something like that, or aunt, maybe here, right? We call them aunts. You can't go through an experience like that and not have it change you at the core. Whether you're, fixing a skinned knee or raising a child with disabilities, I think we're getting every message about what really matters in life. And so then it's hard to go back and sit in a cube with a plastic sign over your head that has a mission statement, right, that you don't really believe in anyway. So I think women are, not here.
Not at Regents.
So I think it's a good thing. Women are building companies that resonate with what matters to them, that allows them to have flexibility to be involved with their family. And when they do that, they bring that to their employees as well.
I totally agree with Liz on that. And well, Regents does say enjoy life, right? Aren't they? That's what they want you to do.
Values.
Right. But I think there's no better time to be alive than today. Anyone who goes wax philosophical about the good old days, they never lived in the good old days, really, or they just don't have the right memory of it. Because the reality is there's no better time for women, particularly young women, than 2015. You have complete opportunity. And it just wasn't always that way. There were a lot of barriers. And today, I think it's a good sign that women pick up and leave the corporate world and say, I'm going to go start my own business. I say, great. That because, what you want in life is freedom of choice to do what you want to do. And there were so many centuries where women had no freedom to decide what they wanted to do. They didn't have any freedom at all to decide a career path or to use their special skills in any particular way. And today, if you have an idea and you want to act upon it, and you can leave your corporate job and you can go out there and make your own mark on the world, go do it. Good. And I think it's empowering for women, and more women are doing it, and I think it's a great trend.
I love that.
Can I add just one
Oh, please.
note of sobering? I totally agree with all that's said, but I do think fundamentally we have to take very seriously the retirement gap, and it is very much a gender issue. And there's been lots written on it recently, but I do worry a little bit because as an entrepreneur myself, I know I don't quite get that same match in retirement planning and tax advantage retirement planning. And I think as an industry, we have to have very thoughtful conversations with women at all fronts because we are living much longer. What was the statistic you said? 15 years on average
Yeah,
longer?
so women out, if the baby boomer generation, wives outlive their husbands by 70% of the wives outlive their husbands by 15 to 20 years.
Yeah. I've watched that with both sets of my grandparents, and I do worry that women earning 70 cents on the dollar, even in corporate America, let alone in a small business or entrepreneurial venture, where you don't have those advantages of the retirement savings. I think that's so important that we have a retirement conversation and that be at the forefront for women in thinking about making sure that's being taken care of as
I
well.
think it's a really good point. And what's the statistic? Is it only 2% of women-owned businesses break $1 million, I think?
Yeah, it's
So we
quite
really
small.
need to focus on growth. and
Yeah,
how we help
absolutely.
women not just start,
Absolutely.
but thrive.
Yeah.
I like that. So this will be my last question, and then I'll open it up to everyone here. But we touched on this earlier, Mary, when you were chatting about the media landscape and how everything's changing, and companies are sort of coming around to the buying power of women. And I've certainly seen it in the time that BizWomen is less than 2 years old, and in that time, Fortune has added, really expanded their Most Powerful Women's channel. Lena Dunham now has a newsletter for, empowering young women. Vice Media came out with a women-focused channel. I mean, it's just really, there's so much energy around this right now. And that's not even on, the advertising side, on the corporate side. So I'm wondering, has this been a benefit or a detriment? Because there are certainly some women who bristle at the thought of even a website like mine, which is, shining a light specifically on women, and they're saying, no, we want to be included with everybody else. We don't want to be, segmented off to the side. So I'm wondering if, Mary and I can start with you, and whoever else would like to chime in. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think exposure is good. I mean, I'm in the advertising business, so I think exposure is good. And I think the media has done a pretty good job of portraying women in strong leadership positions. That if you look at the top TV shows, it's Empire, it's Scandal, it's The Good Wife. The top blockbuster movie out there right now is Mockingjay, and Jennifer Lawrence, has a really strong lead in that movie. That they're hosting the big award shows on TV, and they're all across the board within the broadcast networks and cable networks and delivering the news and information. So earlier I talked a little bit about advertisers have recognized women for their decision-making power. But I think it even goes one step further, that now the media is creating and investing in all this new media targeting these key decision makers. I mean, Liz has a blog and a website. There's radio shows and radio programs and cable networks. So as women need to be targeted, I think women in turn are doing a good job of creating these media outlets. And advertising, as you can tell from many things I've said, women have done well in that category. It's kind of this mini little oasis in the business world out there. And I think that, these new media ventures will be created by, run by, and, really thrive because of what women are doing.
I think what you're getting at, Mary, is, is it a detriment? Because I don't think the goal for anybody is to be othered, right? I think the goal of diversity is inclusion. Nobody wants to be, and there are the women, right? But until we hit a point where there is equity,
Right.
In finance, in technology, on the business pages, on the op-ed pages, in the media ownership. I mean, until we reach that point, at least critical mass, and then 50-50, then I think it's an excellent thing that we have to shine that light. But the ultimate goal is not to be othered, it's to merge and include.
Well, thank you all so much. I really thoroughly enjoyed being your moderator today. And I know I got a lot out of this conversation. I hope you all did too. Thank you all so much for taking the time to come and sit with us and take part in this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as well.